afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Dojo Live. Today is Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. Can you believe it? We are almost at the end of October. And that also means we're almost at the end of 2020. Hopefully, 2021 will be a lot better than what we've experienced so far. I want to welcome my guest today, who's Lucas Ward. He is the co founder and CTO of Kin Insurance. Hi, Lucas. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic today. But before we go into that, let's get to know you a little bit. Lucas, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, I started out super techie, working at Accenture. Got lucky, got paid to work on open source software. That doesn't happen often. Wrote a framework called Spring Batch. Got to work on a lot of clients. Worked at ThoughtWorks. Got to work there in some great clients. Got to work at Southwest Airlines. And then I started doing startups. This is actually my third. I had a hedge fund analytics business that lucky enough to exit on. Had a machine learning, big data payments company that's my co-founders are still running, and now I'm doing Kin and having a great time.
All right, awesome. Tell us a little bit about Kin. What is Kin about? I like the name.
Kin is in family.
First of all, I want to know, how did you find a name that's only 3 letters? That's really hard to do. Having spent last year looking at various names when we were rebranding our parent company, that is like, kudos for finding that. So tell us a little bit about what Kin is, and how did you come up with that name?
Well, it's funny. The original name was Bright Policy, which is not as good, clearly, but you got to start somewhere. We went through a lot of these exercises, and one of the problem is that in the insurance space, like every little agency may have a little name. And so the trademark stuff, every time we're like, we got a name. And then it was just, nope, got a name. Nope, it's taken. And so this one came up, and we were able to grab it. It took some work to buy and procure it. It cost a couple bucks to do it. I don't think that buyer would prefer that I say the name, but it's probably deductible if you want to look around. And we were able to get it.
Well, congratulations. So what do you guys do? What is the business about?
We're a direct-to-consumer property insurance company. We're based in Florida, so we sell hurricane and other insurance. We just launched in California. We also sell wildfire-exposed insurance, so we don't shy away from those risks. We actually think those are the best opportunities in the property space. And like I said, direct-to-consumer means that you don't need an agent. It's basically you can buy it's like Geico, but for home insurance. And a lot of people don't know Geico only sells auto, and some people even think they have Geico home, but actually they've just brokered somebody else's. So.
Right, they have a lot of affiliates that they work with. All right, so let's get to the topic today, because it's a very interesting topic, and that is learning from failure and why failure is our most important teacher. So personally, it's taken me a long time to accept that concept, but I embrace it fully today. I'm curious, why did you choose this topic? Is this something that you've personally experienced that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it means a lot, right? Because I grew up in rural Missouri, and I've gone all the way from there, here to Chicago, traveled the world, been able to build some companies, and I have failed a lot, and I don't think you can actually grow. I think growth is, in order to grow, you have to fail, you have to struggle, and if you're not doing that, you're not growing. And I'll sometimes have people and friends be like, it seems like this is like an incredible amount of work. This is like, yeah, it's really, really hard, but I'm just a really growth oriented person. That's something that's really important to me. It's always been important to me. And you can't grow without failing. You can't grow without struggling. And you see it a lot, even with employees I've had and others, that they oftentimes don't even want to admit they need help, or they want to ask a question, because in that mind, it means I don't know, or I'm failing. And it's just, there's power in that. And then and if you're not doing that, you're stuck. You're not moving forward. And I'm sort of all about moving forward. And that's why the concept of failure and struggle is so important to me.
Unfortunately, my generation and even the previous generation, I'm almost 50, were raised in a mindset of succeed at all costs, right? Always show up successful, image matters. It's all this nonsense that we were sold. Whoever created that nonsense, we were sold it, and we bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And so it created this model where people are afraid to admit when they need help. And or they look at failure as like the end of the world. how have you personally looked at it as an opportunity for growth? Because you mentioned it's the most important teacher in the topic. How has it been a teacher to you?
Mostly because I failed a lot, like a lot in a lot of different areas of my life. And as somebody who is ambitious and has drive and wanted to do these kinds of things, um, I just realized that this is the deal, right? Like, no matter what you want to do, whether you want to learn a language, and I'm super in linguistics and learning languages, you're going to have, a lot of the times people can't say, just to use a non-technical thing, like, I want to speak another language. And the reason that they don't is because they're afraid they're going to fail or sound silly or whatever and be corrected. So they're never actually able to speak the language. Why are there a lot of people that have started to play guitar but never actually achieved playing guitar? Because everybody would love to be the guy on stage, just like, Van Halen, topical, right? But the problem is that's the results of, hundreds and hundreds of hours, that failure. And I think there's a lot of people like me that are like, smart people that expect it to come really, really quickly and not realize that. And I was them. I was totally that, right? And I think a lot of that, I had a lot of success early in my career quickly. And for me, like, then you start running into things. And I think a lot of us in our mid to late 20s have to come to grips with things, right? It's things like this, that you're going to fail all the time.
It's interesting. I recently spoke with an organizational change management expert, and we were talking about how we often strive for predictability and stability in our lives versus adaptability, which means things are not going to always last exactly the way you planned them, and things will not necessarily go in the direction you thought they would go. And you could look at them as quote unquote failures or just another successful outcome that didn't work. It's like science, right? If science was afraid to fail, we would discover nothing. We would have no progress at all. So, but the biggest challenge, as you mentioned, is the mindset, shifting from this mindset of I am a failure / loser to I just learned another way that didn't work and I grew from that. How has that served you in this business that you're building at Kin?
Let me turn it another way and say, if you're not comfortable failing, are you trusting yourself? Right? Because that's what matters. Do I trust myself? Because you're gonna have things, and you trust yourself to deal with things. That's the important bit. And when Sean and I were first starting this business, because I remember, like, the first time I met the guy, it was at a coffee shop, and I was kind of at the end of my second startup. I remember him telling me the thing he was working on. I was like, I don't know, that sounds stupid, but we should start a company together, right? And there's this sort of, we kind of went through that, and eventually we ended up finding a part-time consulting gig, and we knew the kind of company we wanted to build. We knew we wanted to build something that was big, impactful, and we had two rules, right? It's got to be able to be fast, get big, and do it fast, right? And we just went around telling people, hey, we're going to build $1 billion company. That's what we're going to do. That's our goal. And that's a little bit of a ridiculous thing to do. And then we didn't actually say it that way. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's what we did. And we just had to trust ourselves and realize that we were going to fail on the way, but that was the goal. We were just going to keep marching towards that goal. And I think lots of times people, okay, I know I want to be here, right? And I'm here, but like, I can't see how I can get from here to there. It's like, well, do the next thing you can do. And then they fail and they say, like, I'm never going to get there. It's like, you have to trust yourself that you're going to keep figuring it out. And I guarantee you, if you go back in time and ask us if we were to be running an insurance company, I think we would have told you you're crazy. But here we are, one step at a time.
So yeah, I'm curious to understand what made you guys choose to go down this path, this particular business. You're a technologist. You could have chosen anything in terms of building something of value in the marketplace. Did you guys see a need or an opportunity, a gap? How did you come to this idea of let's create a direct-to-consumer insurance company for home insurance? How did you guys stumble on that?
Well, basically, we had 2 days a week we were in the office at our consulting gig, and otherwise we were just meeting with people. And one of those people turned out to be Dan Reed at American Family Ventures, who Sean, my co-founder, used to work with at BCG. And as we were kind of looking at what was going on, there's a few things that stood out to us. Again, the criteria was can it get big? Can it do it fast? So B2B is a little bit rough. It's kind of hard to scale a B2B company really fast, but open-minded. So we weren't really that interested in trying to sell to insurance companies. But what we learned is that the property insurance space is a $100 billion market. Well, there's the big, right? And then you learn that 94% of it is still sold through brokers. And those brokers take 15% of the cost structure. And they take that on a renewal basis. So if you're one of those insurance agents, right, and once you get your book up, you're making six figures or whatever, you can kind of just manage the churn, and that's kind of it. And I don't think they were adding a lot of value. And as a technologist, we both had a lot of fintech experience automating underwriting processes. We just done that over and over again. So it's like, well, we kind of know that. And when you think about things like, can it do it big? It's like, well, if we're not going to use agents, we're going to go direct, and we sort of build that engine. Once we've got all the pieces in place, we can just scale it. And that was ultimately where we started from. And from there, it was just we bought a small agency to just try it. It was a little bit more of like a lean startup approach of let's just try it. It was taking them 30 minutes to quote someone, and I got it down to 5 minutes with just like a couple weeks of work. And like, all right, this seems like it's a thing. It's a whole situation. And that's how we got started in it.
So as you were starting to build this out, and you went from 30 minutes to 5 minutes in terms of just even being able to quote a consumer, were there some things you learned along the way in terms of consumer expectation for the experience that they want to have? I'm assuming, is this online? Is this an app? What kind of experience did you learn was critically important to the consumer in order to get better adoption, or in this case, I guess, more sales, more insurance customers? What lessons did you learn in that process of building it as well?
I don't think millennials are the only people that don't like talking to people on the phone. I think that's so. We went in thinking that we were going to have a lot like younger demographic and stuff, and I think our average customer is 55, and it was 55 when we were starting too. And Florida may skew that a bit, but I don't think that's the case. So that was definitely blown out of the water a little bit. Trying to think of what some other.
So wait, you went into someone with assumptions that this was going to serve a marketplace of millennials that don't want to deal with being on the phone or interacting. They just want to interact with an app, and discovered most of us actually would rather just interact with an app.
Yeah.
Because it's self-service is always good service because you're the one providing it to yourself, right? So what was how did you guys eventually stumble and say, oh, wow, we just learned that? Did you create some kind of user group? How do you validate ideas in terms of how you bring new functionalities to your platform?
Well, what I did was I copied. We had a partner we were working with, and I copied. I was able to like match the rating out, so that it matched the same, and so I could give them that digital experience. But on the back end, we had a team that was basically, once you were kind of done, they just copied it to the other system. The reason they did that is because building up all of and having done it, it's a lot of work to build a full-fledged, policy administration system. We wanted to test it out and see what worked. And we did that, and I remember April of that year, we sold 7 policies. In May, we sold 14, and every day we were just doubling. And in June, we were sold 32. And then we got our seed round raised, and we were able to hire more people. And then that, all of a sudden we were like, wow, we're really onto something here. And it just kind of exploded from there. It was a wild ride for sure.
So where are you now in terms of your projection for growth? Are you on track, or is there like a leapfrog moment that would say, you know what, we did it? What's the target you're shooting for?
Yeah, I would say things are going really, really great. I mean, we just closed our Series B round. I guess I want to say that's in June, I think. We've raised $87 million to date. We have our own sort of insurance carrier. I think the big thing, speaking of failure, is that we ultimately realized that we needed to sort of build our own insurance carrier. And that was where things were, it was definitely rough. But it's difficult to try and innovate to this level, especially because we're the first wave in property insurance. There hasn't been a lot of innovation there. So there's a lot of skepticism, and rightfully so. I understand the position of someone who's been in insurance 30 years, and there's a couple tech dudes saying they can do it better. I'm sure that's happened to every industry that's ever been disrupted. But the barbarians are at the gates, and we bought our laptops. And
I love that.
Yeah, and so there was definitely a moment where Sean and I said, "Screw it, put the chips all in. We're going to start an insurance carrier." We had 12 months to do it, and we did. To sort of better serve our customers. And ever since we've done that, which has been a little over a year and a half ago, I'd say it's up and to the right. And obviously, even with COVID and things, it's people still need insurance, and even more so, I think it's even bigger thing, and especially with the hurricane situation and the reinsurance market in Florida, I think that's made our approach even more valid. And with the situation happening in California with the wildfires, I mean, we're actually one of the few companies adding policies that have wildfire exposure in California. So I think, given that, you can imagine things are going quite well right now, and we continue to grow week over week, on a consistent basis.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm curious to dig in a little bit more about the decision to actually not just be a distribution channel or a platform to gain access to policies, but to actually become a full-fledged insurance company. And what comes to mind is this idea of many tech companies pride themselves, like Uber's like the biggest taxi company in the world, but owns zero taxis, right? Or
Yeah.
Facebook is the biggest media company in the world, but it owns zero content. At what point did it make sense to say, you know what, we're not going to be just a direct-to-consumer platform that has no infrastructure or no actual product of our own? What triggered that decision? Was it pressure from investors to show greater value? Was it just easier to serve the customers? How did you guys get there? I'm curious to see how that decision was made, because that's a pretty big pivot, I would assume, from when you started out, right?
Yeah, I mean, we always knew that distribution was the killer app. That it was all about how you acquire the customer, and that was where we could do things. I think that if I think about it, it goes back to, like, if you want to be a startup and you want to grow quickly and you want to really disrupt something and do things differently, you need to be able to move fast and need to be able to take risks, right? And obviously with insurance, we want to do that correctly. And we have, our chief compliance officer and our chief legal officer, Angel Conlon, is amazing. So that's another key. That if you're in a regulated area, don't screw around with it. Find somebody that really, really knows it. Bring them on board. Get them excited. And we appreciate Angel, even if we're giving her crazy ideas and she's saying, no, you can't do that. That's against the law, and we follow her advice, to be very clear, to the word. So you got to be able to do that. But within that bounds, if you really want to innovate and try something new, how can you do that if you don't control? So, for example, if you're there's a couple different layers. You could be your own underwriter. You could have some underwriting authority, or you could have own the whole thing. And if you're borrowing somebody else's paper and they're on the hook, like if you mess up, it's their business is on the line. They're obviously not going to let you move really quickly. They're going to be a lot more conservative. And to just give an example, let's say I want to take a small percentage and say, I'm going to try this, but I'm going to keep it really bounded, which is something we would normally do in the startup world. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to move forward. Though they're not going to do that, or if they do, it's going to take 6 months and a lot of time to try it, and it's just not really going to work. But I think the markets. I mean, look at Root, who's about to IPO. And people said all of these things about their loss ratio and all that kind of stuff because the insurance world just wasn't used to thinking that way. And yeah, they've dialed it down and their loss ratios have gone down and these types of things. But for them, they just don't think that way. And they were happy. They're all making a lot of money. Things are going well. Why do we need to sort of rock the boat? And I can understand that perspective, but we aim to misbehave, right?
Right, but I mean, ultimately, it sounds to me that you needed to have better control to dictate the outcomes to best serve your customers. And if you're kind of pushing the envelopes and becoming big enough, at some point, you end up competing with the agendas that don't align with what you're trying to accomplish. So you have to bring it in-house. So congratulations. That must have been a tough decision to make and realize, unless that was part of the plan to begin with. But anyway, congratulations for doing that. So to take us back to the topic of learning from failures, our biggest teacher is failure. What would you say are one or two key things that you've incorporated into your company's culture that encourages people to fail upward or to grow and learn from mistakes?
Yeah. So we have 3 values. One of them is run through walls. The cost of doing nothing is higher than the cost of doing the wrong thing, right? sure, that, you know what, that was the wrong wall. It's okay. We're gonna go for that wall now. It's all right. The second one is be chill, and I think that speaks to that, right? Like, we need people to run, and that means they're going to make mistakes. And if you're going to move quickly, you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. Everybody be chill. It's cool. I mean, some of that's a proxy for emotional maturity, right? That, like, it's going to be frustrating and hard and difficult. And the third is to embrace change, because if you're going to, you know, I spoke from the beginning that how our goal was always to grow quickly, and that was kind of the goal from the beginning. And if you're going to do that, at every round of funding, you become a different company. And that's difficult, because, like, well, I was comfortable here. It's like, well, you can't be comfortable here, though, right? Like, we gotta keep going. That's the point. So those are the values we've incorporated in that I think speak to that.
And how do people adopt those when they join the organization? Because I can talk, for example, in our own culture at Ancora Mexico, previously known as Nearsoft, we're a very freedom-based type of organization, self-led. There's not a whole lot of hierarchy. On the left, definitely not formal hierarchy. So you're kind of an adult who's responsible and accountable for yourself, right? And you're treated that way, and you have to act that way. That's just the way it works. But some people who have come from the more traditional, controlled and command kind of a structure have challenges coming into that environment. It's like, you mean I don't have to report to someone? I don't have anyone to impress? I don't have to play this political game of jockeying to look good? Who do I let know that I'm doing my job really well, right? So some people have struggled with that transition. We had one who literally was having a nervous breakdown from that, sadly. So how have you helped employees coming to that environment where it's like, run through walls, chill, and, you know, be okay with making mistakes and growing and learning from them? How are you helping individuals shift from the mindset that perhaps they've had, which is, you know, show up and do the job, be perfect, to, hey, have fun, make mistakes, and grow with it? What's that been like for you guys?
It's been work. It's been challenging, and you can imagine we bring in, you know, folks from more traditional industries, and that can be challenging. And I think, you know, I don't know. I think that, like, when corporations were first being built in the 20th century and they were doing things at bigger scales, the only sort of example they had was the military. And I think they just ended up, like, sort of copying the military. And it's not a terrible model for people that just need to do work when the work doesn't really change that often, right? I mean, it can be disastrous. Take that hill, but actually the entity's moved. But, you know, there's going to be sacrifices in that model, right? I think I talk to people a lot about being able to think about things by influence rather than hierarchical control, right? Like, how do you influence people? And that is really, really tricky, because it can be frustrating. And like, you know, I can't get it and say, like, well, it's so much easier to bring somebody along, to make it be somebody else's idea, right, than it is to order them. Because if they're ordering it, they'll do it, but they're going to do it kind of halfway. They're not going to, their heart's not going to be in it. It's much better to do that. I also talk a lot about defining the problem and getting people on board with the problem, because I think that's another thing. People jump to the solution, and it's like, well, one, actually, if you can't articulate the problem, maybe your solution isn't right. And two, I think if you get people on board with what the problem is, it's way easier to then the solution follows naturally, and it may be, you know, better than the solution you were coming up with. And I think trying to have healthy conflict, like, conflict breeds innovation. You need healthy conflict. And when you have a strict hierarchy where there's just one person doing it, you don't get conflict. You get kind of that one person, right? If you read, like, Guns, Germs, and Steel about, like, why is it that China stopped innovating in the 15th century? It's like, well, it was consolidated, and one person could stop all innovation if they felt like it, and they did, right? Versus Europe, that was spread apart. So, you know, yeah, Columbus had to go to Spain instead of Italy, even though he's Italian, because there was different control and you could do things. So I don't know. I think those are some of the examples you do. And I think some of it, with any leadership, you have to lead by example, and you have to do those things. And I'm sure I'm not perfect, but I think there's a portion of that too.
I love that. I mean, the example of letting people dig deeper into the problem, you know, instead of, we've often heard the saying, come with solutions, don't come with problems, right? And so it's like programming for you to be afraid to dig in and exploit the problem further. And I love this concept you guys have embraced, which is let's dig in and exploit it and look how big it is so that
Yeah.
we perhaps, find other nuggets that we're not looking for, just rushing to a solution that might be half baked.
Yep.
So can you give me one or two examples where that panned out really well for you guys? I'd love to share that with those listening, examples on how to do that effectively. Because I think a lot of companies struggle with digging in deeper to exploit the problem further. They quickly rush to solve the problem. How's that? Can you give me one or two examples where it really panned out very well to do that?
Yeah, I think. I think even if you talk about, I think deciding to go to the carrier is one where you think about the problem. Like, wait, what is the problem we're trying to solve here, right? Like, because a lot of people would say, like, well, you can take sort of this percentage here and do that, but like, wait a minute, what are we trying to do? Like, what is the problem to consumers here, right? Like, what is it they want? Because I can tell you, if you go to one of these insurance conferences, you'll hear big insurance companies talking about engaging with their customers more. And it's like, nobody wants that. There's literally nobody wants to engage with their customer. Like it's a chore. It's a chore. So like what like digging into the problem consumers have, right? And they want it to be cheap, and they want it to not be a hassle. They want to know that you're going to pay out claims. That's what matters, right? So like digging into if you think, you can also use the word priority, but like, what's the actual problem here? And it's another good example of that is like, it seems real neat to give people a lot of these like different devices, but the fact of the matter, like let's say a burglar alarm, but burglary is only like 1% of your, of actual losses. The big one is actually the water loss, right? So, some of those devices are neat solutions, but what's the problem, right? That we're trying to solve.
I love that. Well, we're coming up on time. It's been great to speak with you. I love a lot of the philosophies and principles you guys have adopted in the company, which is obviously panning off. You guys are growing rapidly. You've raised a lot of money. Series B is a proving ground for expansion. So congratulations. This is your third business.
Mm-hmm.
Any words of wisdom in terms of what you've learned about yourself as an entrepreneur, and perhaps some advice for those who are sitting on the fence thinking about it, what they should think about and why?
I'll tell you, if you're thinking of starting a company, get a therapist first. Like, it is going to push you to the absolute limits of everything that you've ever. It's like, especially this kind of high growth stuff, it's going to push every single limit that you ever thought you had, and you are going to fail over and over again. And there's going to be people that you care about that you're going to let down, and not on purpose. It's just the way things are. So I think that would be, going back to this thing, right? You're going to have to embrace failure. You're going to have to embrace people telling you that this isn't work, right? And lots of times, I've met and I've tried to mentor people that are sort of starting out. And if you tell them sort of the direct, hard truth, like, yeah, this is why this probably going to pan out, you could probably generally tell who's going to succeed based on the person who gets defensive and doesn't want to hear it versus the person that hears it and takes it in. And so it's something I think I learned a lot from Sean is that, that you should just go out and ask for help and advice and those types of things. And that would probably be my last advice, is that don't be a sole founder. Find a co-founder that you've got complementary skills with, and do something before you start up with them. Sean and I had a couple things before this, because it's like, it's like a marriage. It's actually harder to get out of than a marriage sometimes. And you're going to have your ups and downs. So you better, and at the end of this, Sean and I have been to war together. And like, at a certain point, the amount of trust you have to have for another person is kind of beyond any I've ever had for almost any other human. So it's a lot. And don't think you can do everything. Don't think this isn't going to be you and you've got everything, because like, I think if you talk to any founder that's been anywhere, it's going to take you to your knees multiple times, and you're going to have to get back up for your knees a couple times. And the only thing that I've ever learned in this world is, no matter how much you get taken down, no matter how much you get beaten down, wake up every morning and scream defiance at the world and keep going, because that's the only thing you can do.
Well, that's great words of advice. Thanks for sharing those with everyone here. And Lucas, thanks for joining me this afternoon here on Dojo Live. Stay with me as we wrap up. Everyone, come back on Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to recap the 3 shows we had this week and talk about the highlights and and recap the key points. So come back at Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific, and we will have a show every day but Friday next week. We have a full week. It will be interesting. Don't miss out. Until then, stay safe.